Okay, let's get into this. Picture this huge mountain, right? Europe's biggest active volcano, Mount Etna. And suddenly there's this massive gray cloud just billowing way up high. You see footage, people kind of scurrying away, red alert planes. Sounds pretty intense.
Absolutely intense. And yeah, that's pretty much the picture painted by the sources you brought us for this deep dive. Mostly news reports, official statements too, covering what just happened at Etna.
Right, so our mission today really is to unpack what these sources actually tell us happened on June 2nd. Get past the dramatic headlines, figure out the geological stuff they described, what the officials really thought about the danger and the impact, especially on flights.
Exactly. It's about digging into the details behind that initial, very striking visual. The sources really do lead with that. The surveillance cams, the eyewitness stuff capturing this, massive gray cloud, like you said.
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention.
That image, the plume, people reacting, it sets the scene.
Okay, so jumping into the specifics from the source material, what did the reports actually say started all this? And when did it kick off?
So, according to the INGV, that's the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology, the main event started mid-morning. It was around 11:24 a.m. local time, Monday, June 2nd. Their monitoring cameras, which are basically watching Etna constantly, caught that first moment.
And was that initial event, I think the reports mentioned something about, like, a collapse.
Precisely. Yeah, the INGV described seeing, and I'm quoting roughly here, a pyroclastic flow probably produced by a collapse of material, and specifically from the northern flank of the southeast crater. So you can sort of picture a chunk of the crater wall giving way up there.
Okay, but pyroclastic flow, the sources were pretty clear these are seriously dangerous things.
They really are. The reports explain, it's not just ash drifting down, it's this super hot mix, rock fragments, gas, ash, just surging down the volcano side incredibly fast. One source flat out calls them extremely dangerous. So that initial collapse turned into this hazardous surge.
Yeah, right. A collapse leads straight to this dangerous flow. So what happened next? According to the sources, what did the INGV see after that first surge?
Well, the Institute noted a change. The explosive activity, it had transitioned to a lava fountain. So first the collapse and the surge, and then you've got molten rock actually jetting up into the air from the vent. They also predicted the ash cloud from that would drift off towards the southwest.
Huh. That sequence. Collapse, flow, then fountain. It kind of tells you something about the pressure building up and releasing, doesn't it?
It really does paint a picture of the dynamics involved.
Given how dramatic that sounds and probably looked, what were the official reports saying about the danger level for people actually on the ground?
And this is, I think, a really key point from the sources. Despite how it looked, despite confirming this dangerous pyroclastic flow happened, the message from officials was pretty consistent. No immediate danger to the general population.
Okay, but who was actually saying that? Were there specific names in the reports?
Yeah, the president of Sicily, Renato Schifani, he's quoted. He said experts assured him there was no danger for the population. He also pointed out the flow didn't go beyond the Valley of the Lions, which is, an area tourists sometimes visit.
Right, okay. So even with those reports, which the sources said couldn't be fully verified of tourists hurrying away, the official line was still no immediate threat.
Correct. Although there was maybe a slight nuance there. The head of their regional civil protection unit, Salvo Caccina, he did recommend tourists maybe avoid the area. His reasoning was in consideration of the potential evolution of the phenomenon. So basically, be cautious. But it wasn't like a full-scale evacuation order or anything.
Yeah. That's an interesting balance, isn't it? Managing the perception versus the actual immediate risk and the potential risk.
Exactly. That comes through in the different official statements reported.
Okay, so that's the situation on the ground. What about the air? Volcanic ash in airplanes?
Yeah.
That's usually a big problem.
A huge problem. And the sources absolutely confirm a red alert was issued for aviation. The ash cloud was, pretty high estimated, around 6.5 kilometers. That's, over 4 miles up?
Wow, yeah, that's a serious plume. So the local airport, Catania, I guess it must have shut down.
Well, and this is where it gets really interesting, based on what the sources say. Despite that red alert, despite this massive ash cloud, Catania Airport apparently stayed open. It remained operational.
Really? A red alert usually implies significant risk. For the airport to stay open. I mean, that suggests their monitoring must be incredibly precise.
It does.
They must have been able to say, okay, the risk right now, right here, isn't prohibitive. Or maybe the wind was just taken the ash well clear of the flight paths at that moment.
It definitely highlights how advanced the monitoring around Etna must be and the procedures they have for, making those real-time risk calls. That specific detail is quite telling.
Yeah, that precise risk management is a key thing we can pull from the sources here.
Definitely.
And speaking of Etna itself, the sources also sort of remind us what kind of volcano we're talking about here.
Right. It's easy to forget sometimes, but Etna is hardly ever quiet. The sources call it Europe's largest and most active volcano.
An active stratovolcano, they describe it as.
Exactly that. And the reports really emphasize its history. It's known for frequent, almost persistent activity. So this event, while, dramatic, it kind of fits into a known pattern for Etna. Its activity can be explosive bursts like this one, or lava flows, or just constant gas coming out. One source even mentions skiers on nearby slopes relatively close to lava flows earlier this year.
Wow. That just shows you how dynamic that whole environment is.
It really does.
And I suppose that constant activity is why it's so heavily monitored. There was one other detail in the sources that caught my eye, something about tremor amplitude.
Ah, yes, an INGV spokesperson mentioned that the values of the tremor amplitude are currently high, with a tendency to increase further.
Okay, so what does that actually mean, volcanic tremor amplitude?
Well, volcanic tremor is basically the continuous ground shaking caused by stuff happening underground, usually magma moving or gases. The amplitude being high and especially increasing, that's a signal scientists watch really closely. It can suggest, rising pressure or more magma moving around inside the volcano's plumbing system, so to speak.
Interesting. Okay, so let's try and pull this all together just based on the picture these sources have painted for us in this deep dive. On June 2nd, around mid-morning, 11:24 AA-ish, part of the southeast crater flank collapses. This triggers a dangerous, fast-moving pyroclastic flow,
Right.
which then changes into a lava fountain, shooting molten rock up and creating this big ash cloud about 6.5 kilometers high, drifting southwest.
Yeah, that's the sequence described.
Officials, despite how it looked and the real danger of the flow, said no immediate threat to towns, likely because the flow stayed contained, but they did advise some caution for tourists nearby.
Correct on the official stance.
Aviation authorities issued a red alert because of the ash, but significantly, Catania Airport stayed open, pointing to some sophisticated real-time risk assessment.
That operational status is definitely noteworthy.
And all this happened on Mount Etna, which the sources remind us is Europe's biggest, most active stratovolcano, constantly doing something. And there's this underlying signal of increasing tremor amplitude that scientists are watching.
That sums up the key points drawn directly from the source material we looked at quite well.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about just how dynamic our planet is, especially when people live, work, and travel so close to these incredibly powerful, kind of unpredictable natural features like Etna.
Absolutely. And it underscores how vital that continuous monitoring and clear communication really are for managing the risks involved.
Yeah, balancing safety with, well, reality. It's a constant challenge in these areas.
It truly is.
Which maybe leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought to mull over.